I'm the co-moderator of PQ Talks that are curated by my wonderful colleague Barbara Příhodová. Very warm welcome and a very humid welcome to this, to Jatka 78. This is a panel called Bodies of Knowledge, Future in Costume Pedagogy. If you are new to PQ Talks, please check out the program. It's fantastic, and the audiences have been absolutely wonderful with questions, and there have always been wonderful discussions after the talks. So as people are sitting down, without further ado, I will introduce the moderator of Bodies of Knowledge, Future in Costume Pedagogy, who will then introduce the wonderful speakers from 3 continents to talk about costume pedagogy. So over to Madeline Taylor.
Thank you so much, and welcome, and so pleased to see everybody here. My name is Madeline Taylor. I'm a lecturer at Queensland University of Technology and also a costume supervisor and technician and occasional designer. And my research really looks at the kind of interpersonal dynamics of costume collaboration in the costume workshop. And we're really lucky to have a great panel here today of Erica, Rebecca, Jorge and Sue, and I'll let them introduce themselves as they do their talks. And so how today is going to run is basically each of these panelists are going to kind of do a short presentation on some of the ideas and challenges and questions they're currently wrestling with within costume pedagogy to kind of provide some juicy kind of framework for what's going to be a kind of a focus on a panel conversation between us all, and then we've allowed significant time for conversation with you all as well, because I want to recognise that we are all kind of wrestling with this issue, whether we're a student or an educator or a designer who is working with, who have gone through a course and kind of working with new emerging artists. And no one person has the solution to these kinds of challenges and questions that we're wrestling with. It's got to be a collective work to future costume pedagogy. As we go through, because we've allowed for questions, I really want you to kind of to think about some juicy kind of topics to ask the panelists or to open to the audience, and also kind of ideas and kind of thoughts that you're sharing and experiencing yourself. And as we've kind of seen from the panel yesterday on iconographic pedagogy and kind of Marwa's presentation even just before, these kinds of conversations aren't just kind of boxed into this panel. It's kind of across so much of the discussion that's happening as part of this PQ Talks program. Without further ado, I would love to introduce Erica Schwarz from the University of Campinas in Brazil to talk about your experience. Oh, yes. There you go.
Hi, good morning. First, I would like to thank Maddie's invitation. I'm really happy to be here and sharing with this community. I will start addressing that I used to teach for design students, but now I'm teaching for acting students. And now I'm kind of rethinking also my methodology and pedagogies. I don't like to think I don't believe we have only one narrative to talk about pedagogy, maybe pedagogies in plural, as I put in the slide. Here I would like to share my context and my experience, and so we can gather and think together of alterity. So first of all, I have a huge class of students, 25 students in my subjects, and we work for a specific integrated production each semester. So the challenge there is that we will always co-create together as a group. They don't design alone, and I really don't think they design actually. They really work with the materiality itself. It's something I'm trying to cope more. So in this slide I put a few notes about my approach and also how I think about the aesthetic of this production with the students. First of all, I try to engage them in a really co-creative way and for them to feel reinforced and able to work with costume, because they are also really blocked at the beginning as performance. But they are the ones that wear the costume, so they are capable to work. So the challenge now is to, I think, work in this inside of force and save their desire to work and to create, especially after the pandemic time. So I put some reference here. I don't know if they seem a bit old-fashioned here in Europe, but in Brazil, when I was studied, my professors, they used to tell me to copy a few references or copy some masters, or to start always the production with some book references, as we saw earlier in the last panel that Marwa was sharing also. So I try to first think of all the students as capable and creative beings. So in this sense, oh, sorry, I lost a bit. I'm a bit nervous, and I also lost the voice as Roseanne at Brazilian Party. So I'm bringing here Thierry Dedieu's article. That was a turning point in Brazil, but it's not every professor is really connected with this change of paradigm in pedagogy, because we don't need to copy a master. We are all creative, and we also need to have a political approach in our art. So I'm just referencing it. And in this sense, I always work with a notion, two Brazilian notions I would like to share here. One is that we think of teaching in we have a word, it's like ensino-aprendizado. Teaching, learning, connected with an hyphen. So this notion already puts our work as an educator in a more horizontal way, I believe. And in this sense, I learn with the students, they learn with me, and again, they are capable, they don't need to copy me. And I'm not think myself much as a mentor, but I'm always trying to provoke them in the class and establishing new strategies, sensing the energy in the class so they can feel comfortable and strong to create. The second notion I would like to share is a new concept I'm now researching of Paulo Freire's. It's a pedagogue from Brazil. It's the notion, and we have in Portuguese, boniteza words. We have like beauty, but it will be bonito, but he talks about boniteza. It's like beauty together with ethical concern, you know? So I'm trying always to approach with the student, our work here won't be decorative. It's conceptual, it's political, it's ethical, it's ecological, so it's a lot of, it's a complex word. So a few strategies here, I have time, it's okay. First, to make them comfortable. They are really afraid to start creating the costume. So you are able, we can draw, and so I work with always in a circle shape with them. This is why I'm writing about costume in circle. In Portuguese, we have the word roda. It's the same for wheel, from engine, is the same for the round shape. So I think all these layers is in my research now. You know, you put the wheel to move. We sit as a group. I always sit at the same level as them. We discuss together. We throw ideas to the center of the circle. Some ideas will grow, some we will throw away, and it's fine. And we will listen to each other and always work as a group and try to establish this temporary community. I really like to think that we can have also, of course, some solid community, but also we can gather, feel like a community, and then we can say goodbye and everything is fine. So I'm using music with them to sensibilize the body, and then after the music, I invite them to draw in a very free way so they can start drawing. We also do a lot of conceptual maps in this circle shape, like throwing ideas. So how is the rehearsal going? You are the actors, what are you doing? What do you sense in this workshop of the scene? And then we throw words with together, and after we write them, and then we go back to drawing. So I try to activate the images and visuality through a lot of exercise that, again, I'm still learning because it's a new challenge to teach visuality and spatial and costume to actors. So a few images of us together. Again, it's a really huge class, and sometimes we face a bit of challenge. For example, sometimes the students that identify themselves as a male, they prefer to work with scenography, leaving the costume for the women, and I was always provoking, why? Why will we work with wood and they will sew for you? So all the time, a lot of contemporary urgencies and issues cross the space of the class. So here we can see a few drawings in the circle exercises, and we're talking. They also, as a performer, they sing, they play instruments. Sometimes I invite them to talk, to sing in the class, and then we go to the materiality. Another issue that crosses a lot our universe is that because we don't have a lot of money at the university, we don't have funding, so this is also a problem for our, I don't like to say production, I believe this integrated project is an exercise through the path in the university, because production, I think sometimes about a product, and I'm more interested in the process and in this, and them growing as artists, of course. So the budget is sometimes a problem for us. So we also develop strategies. We have a small archive, a costume collection at the university. So we go there a lot and rework on the costumes, on the wearables we already have. They also bring a lot of clothes from home. This is a reality for us. And we also go to thrift shops, but of course you can think of this strategy as an ecological approach, but it's a complex ecological approach, I believe. As Guattari would say, we have like a social layer, economical layer, we have a mental layer of ecology also, and also, because sometimes we tend to think about ecology only thinking about nature, right? But I think it's also a socio-economical layer here in this strategy. Okay, I will just, it's the time? I will just finish. So here a few goals that I bring, that's the energy I want to bring to the class. So in our graduation course, we think of the performer is a very multi-artist. So he can sing, he can play, he can prepare his own costume. Autonomy, it's really important for us. And also them bringing their own references. So I try to listen a lot. What do you like? What do you see? Movies, music, what's your reference? I don't bring my reference to them. I try to provoke more. And as I said, establishing this community, they enter the university on the first year and they work as a company to the end of the course. So we are really interested in establishing a community and having a porosity space. Thank you. Sorry about the time.
Hello, I'm Rebecca Pride, and I am Associate Professor at the Arts University Bournemouth, which for context is a university in the UK dedicated only to art subjects, and it's about 2 hours from London on the south coast, and we have quite a long tradition of teaching costume within our university. Right, move on to the next one. And I teach, I used to lead a BA Costume and Performance Design course, and I now lead an MA in Historical Costume. Okay, so this slide is about what costume pedagogy has meant to me in the almost 20 years that I've been teaching costume and performance design and costume supervision. So I was very lucky to have an interview with the fantastic, amazing human, she calls herself, Catherine Kodacek, who some of you probably have heard of. Catherine is was the writer on the Stage newspaper in the UK, writing about costume matters. And I was lucky enough to have an interview with her, and she expressed this amazing description, to my mind, of what we're up against in costume. The hierarchies. I mean, shall I read it to you? In costume, we have such a huge mountain to climb because it's not just about finding recognition for what we do. We are fighting against late-stage capitalism, patriarchy, and internalized gender roles. We are at the forefront of equality fighting, and we cross so many subsections. That's the problem. We can be voices. We can say this is our truth and this is what is happening. But all the forces that want to keep women in a box and keep things a certain way, that's what we are up against. And, I just think that that encapsulates the heart of some of the problems that we encounter. In the UK, the film and theatre industries contribute billions of pounds to the economy, as I'm sure they do in other countries here. And yet, we still are having to fight to get recognition for what we do. And I first heard from Catherine on a radio show in the UK, which is all about theatre, called Front Row. And I was driving back from work, I was leading a BA then, dealing with the usual problems, how to get budgets, how to, get time, how to get time for fittings, how to get, all of these problems that we've all have. And it was like, oh God, driving home. And I switched on the radio and I heard Catherine talking. And she said, and I'm just going to read it out now. The fact that we are predominantly women does affect pay, and that a movement of costume professionals need to persuade those who control the financial aspects, hang on a minute, of film and theatre, that we are worth paying properly and being looked after. And this slide and the text, when I heard her speak, I thought, right, I'd heard of her, but I've got to actually talk to her directly. And so, and this all happened around the time of the pandemic. So we started this fantastic conversation on Zoom, and she came and spoke to my students, my BA students at that time, who were also struggling with all the issues of the pandemic. It was just so incredibly powerful. And I feel that this is at the heart of what we encounter in higher education. How do we advocate for what we do? We're all amazingly creative. I've been listening to these fantastic talks today from everyone and seeing all this wonderful work here at PQ. But we do need to address the elephant in the room, I think, which is, how do we teach students to know their own value, that is the heart of what I'm trying to do. Particularly the disillusioned Generation Z, as they're called, and the Generation A who are coming forward. These students have new concerns that we can see here, obviously with sustainability and ecology, with gender roles. These are the things that we have got to address as educators. The education of these students has been disrupted enormously. So these are the things that I'm trying to think about. And also us as educators, we've had to dealing with the students whose education has been disrupted, and that has had an effect on us as well that I think we need to, acknowledge. So I've been researching. I'm studying for a doctorate in education. I'm going into my 5th year now. And I've devised this system that I call intimate sonography, which is trying to find a pedagogy to help students learn how to conduct a costume fitting properly, how to manage the process, because I don't think we teach it, do we? I'm going to go on because I'm on the wrong slide here. I'm so sorry. What's happened? There you go. I read it out to you anyway. It doesn't matter, does it? Right, so here I've got this sort of patched together image to show the problem that I think we encounter. So you have a beautiful rail of costumes there. And this was for a production of Etheridge's The Man of Mode that we did at our university before the pandemic. So there you have the beautiful rail of costumes. All those costumes have been made. They've been designed. You can see the design on the right-hand side there. Obviously, thousands of little micro decisions have had to be made by that costume designer. The research, the cut, the line. Then we've had fabric trips to source fabrics. Then they've had to be cut, and all the research by the cutters to cut them. I mean, these are millions of decisions that have to be made. And then you've got the fitting process there. You've got a costume designer, you've got a cutter pinning the costume, you've got the actor, you've got assistants, standing by, helping in every stage of the process. And I like to think at my own university that we do this really well. We do inculcate. Sorry, I'm talking too long. Right, yeah, sorry. No pressure. Okay, so all these micro decisions, how do we teach it? Right, next one. So how do we teach these processes to happen? Okay, so we focus on a direct discussion with students about it, what the problems are, how they feel in the costume fitting. We allow for an honest debate between all the participants, ideally the director, the actor, and the makers. And this does happen at theatres like the National Theatre, where they actually have something they call a costume chat. We acknowledge that a costume fitting might be challenging and uncomfortable. And we ask actors to join into the conversation. Are we sure we don't treat them as mannequins? Okay, that's something I'd like to think about. And then we have a debrief at the end of a fitting. I've shown these slides of hashtags where the hashtag seen backstage and hashtag naked without us, which are kind of introducing this idea. So anyway, I think that's it. Yeah, thank you. We must address all these things. Thank you very much.
All right, can you hear me? Yes. All right. Let me, I think, is it me?
Sorry, so no,
It's me.
Sorry, I've been moderating poorly.
Thank you, Jorge. So my voice is a bit croaky, and I wasn't at the Brazilian party. So I'm Sue Osmond. I'm an educator working at the National Institute of Dramatic Art in Sydney. I'm currently involved in a 3-year-long project, a curriculum renewal project, which is sort of doing what we all do as educators, updating the curriculum, but we're in doing it at a kind of higher level with a pretty significant investment in really rebuilding our courses from the ground up. NIDA runs 6 or 7 BFAs in acting, directing, design, costume making, prop making, scenery making, and stage management and technical design, as well as masters in directing and writing. So we are one of the few organisations in the world, that's all we do. And our central pedagogical model is through the play production program. So working together, we're simulating professional collaboration. I mean, that's not unique, but it's fairly unique as being the main focus of the structure. So my particular interest has been in costume, given that 30 years ago I wrote or led the development of the BFA in costume at NIDA, which was specialising in supervision and making. Leading out of a kind of need that I saw in the industry for a degree course in that gave people skills to enter the industry, which at that time was really developing in Australia. And I think for the purposes of looking at how the huge cultural, social and technological shifts that are happening now, influence our curriculum, costume is a great place to start, because the body is at the focus of those changes. And as Rebecca says, the fitting room is the absolute pinnacle, fulcrum of that change, where all of those social changes, the technological changes come into being. Sorry, I'll move on to my next slide. So that was just some of the breadth of the activities we've been involved in the last few years. The challenges and the opportunities for this. The first one is degendering our curriculum. Again, we are not alone in that. I think this is a thing that we're all doing. I think Jorge's going to talk about this. We currently have 10 to 15% of our costume students identify as non-binary. So that is, the push is coming from them. We began this project with the idea of educating the students for the careers that they would have, not the ones that we had. I think that's what we all want to do. But the real push was coming from our students to say, what is men's tailoring? What is women's millinery? And pushing aside that sort of corsets and crinolines view of costume that so drew me to this 30, 40 years ago. And reinventing a different pedagogy for costume. Secondly, we looked at decolonising, which I think in many contexts is really urgent, the curriculum. One of the sort of standout moments of reflection for me was we did an interview with the one First Nations costume graduate, and I asked her what was one of the most challenging things to do with doing this course. And I fully expected her reply to be about the support that she didn't get or wanted more of for the academic side of the course, or having a community around her, all of those things which we can always do better, of course. But what she said, which was so shocking, was she said what was difficult was, quick context, most of you will be familiar with the fact that in costume classes we make for each other, yeah? She said, I've spent 3 years standing around in corsets and crinolines wearing the clothes of the oppressor, of the coloniser. So that was a real moment of, wow, we've really got to rethink this. And the fact that the students are not so interested in that corsets and crinolines view of costume, then that isn't such a prevalent capacity for them when they leave either. And many of them come now from a sort of cosplay, they're interested in film, in digital, and yeah, so as much as, the curriculum renewal project is common sense and based on a sort of top-down initiative, the real energy is coming from the students. I suppose that's all I want to say. Have I run out of time? Yeah, almost, thank you. And of course, integrating technology, blah, 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 which is like we're all doing. Both in a way, I've said there, in a way that, the last thing we want to do is have our costume students spending hours sitting in front of a computer while it renders something. But given that for all of us, the culture of sort of incremental skills, it means that we're having to fit more and more and more and more into our curricula. But yeah, so I'll move on to Jorge. Thank you. Thank you.
Here I am. Ta-da! So I'm so glad that I'm just after Sue, because I'm talking about EDI, equality, diversity, and inclusion. So the little part that I'm just going to present is a project that I started. I'm working at UAL, University of the Arts London. I'm the course leader for the Costume for Performance course. And I'm really, really happy to work on this project. So this project is called the Non-Binary Costume Project. And so it's all about inclusion, it's all about the diversity. So usually when I talk to my students, I always go like, I'm the perfect example of that. I'm Mexican, living in London, I'm gay, working with you. I'm really kind of feeling nervous talking to all these people. So it's a really, really good way to introduce myself to the students and make them aware. So the idea is about awareness. And I'm going to give you another example. Just before this panel, and after that interesting panel that we just had before, I had to go to the bathroom. So I went to the bathroom, ran in there, and it took me 2 seconds to do my business and get out of there. And there was this long line of women waiting for the bathroom. So there's bathroom parts in the men's bathroom that could be used for women to be there. So, and it's all about diversity, and it's all about awareness, it's inclusion. So I'm not blaming anybody, I'm just thinking that we have to be aware of what we are and who we are and the moment we are living. So this very first slide talks about how industry and education now needs to be aware of many things. So all of us as students or practitioners, we have found ourselves in a fitting maybe, or in a wardrobe where we don't know how to deal with bodies. Maybe our own body, so maybe it's a trans body, our body. Maybe it's the performance body that is different. Maybe the situation creates a very uncomfortable way, and we don't know how to deal with it. So industry doesn't know how to do it, and us as educators, we need to be aware, and we need to be ahead of that uncomfortable feeling. So it's our responsibility to be the leaders for that change. So we have with our students to be really, really ahead of the game and start thinking, how are we going to deal with that? And it's not about dealing, it's not a problem, it's just about awareness of how we're going to be doing that. So students are already working on that. So then I don't have to tell them, so then work on non-binary. Themselves, they are already thinking how my body fits in this world. This world is very different, very complicated, and it's not like an awful world, it's just a different world. So our students are already designing, already thinking that kind of world, so through the body, and their own bodies or other bodies. So in the fashion world or in the costume world, it's a very complicated way to deal with materiality. So one simple example, and all of us are talking about that, is fittings, or just talking about pattern cutting. So how are we going to deal with the binary? So because we're only teaching a bodice or a corset for women, or menswear, so a pair of pants and a jacket. So we're perpetuating the binary. So, and we should be thinking different ways to present a more kind of inclusive way to teach, an inclusive way to learn, and an inclusive way to go to industry. So they can still learn all these very useful skills that we're teaching them, but then we have to kind of adjust it to the way that we're including everybody in their thinking. So then they can just progress, they can be more aware, they can be more open. Because I think by perpetuating the binary, even when we're thinking that we're not, because if we're doing, well, this person is just transforming, it's a transgender person. So it's coming from a woman to a man, or from a man to a woman, and it's not true. So then there's different ways to see bodies, different ways to be aware of all those bodies. So, and it's just through conversations, through working, so through mentoring students. I don't think teaching is the word that we have to use these days. I think it's mentoring and consulting and working, collaborating with students, because a lot of the times they know more about their own bodies, they know more about how to work with them than we do. So we have the skills, we have all these things that we can teach them, but at the same time, so they can teach us. So as a conclusion, because I saw the, do it quickly. So I can just like show you a little bit, like our students are already, like I said, thinking about it. So then they're really, really thinking forward, and I'm learning a lot about them, and we all should be aware of this trend. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, it's so hard because we want to have the time to talk to you all, but also everyone here has such wonderful kind of thoughts and contributions to make. So I just want to kind of now open up the conversation a little bit. I guess one of the things that's kind of a through line in one of the conversations is this way we're talking about kind of the points of resistance and the kind of stumbling blocks in making pedagogical change, whether that's kind of older paradigms or kind of old ways of thinking, or which is the same thing, or kind of the kind of tools and technologies we're using. And I'm really interested in also in this kind of conversation, how we make inclusive approaches to costuming practice, and that has to happen both in the process, in the workrooms, in the fitting rooms, and also in the meanings and outcomes and the products, the productions that we make. So keeping those two kind of thoughts in mind, I would love to kind of hear from you all about how do we make more inclusive costume spaces, whether that's race, gender, culture, ability, genre? How do we teach these, and how do we kind of teach our students to create these spaces as they enter into the profession? Anybody? Go away, please, take it away.
So I think one of the ways that we can do is just to like create conversations where we can ask students, like, how can we work on this? So then we're talking about like gender neutral kind of processes. So because they don't exist. So then how can we create our own process to include gender neutral like bodies in the pattern making, in the draping, in all these like different skills. And I think it's just by including the student in the conversation rather than we telling them what to do. So it opens to this.
I like the idea of prefacing, giving more dominance to the process of draping rather than pattern making, I suppose, and that brings it round to the mannequin becomes the performer, and we pad out the mannequin to fit that performer, highly labour intensive, but a much more democratic, empathetic way of working, particularly if we also include those bodies in transition, which you mentioned, Jorge, but also increasingly, and in my own practice, working with actors with disabilities. So actors who are in wheelchairs or maybe have a degree of a cognitive difference, which means they don't want to deal with certain, they find it challenging to deal with certain shapes or fabrics or even colours. So bringing that level of empathy into the process from a very technical perspective, I think is something, and then that feeds into the fitting room, where all those things come together.
I think we need to get a fitting room first, because I know that in my university, even though it's very well funded and we have amazing, amazing studios, it took quite a long time to actually get a properly functioning, caring space that had everything you need for a fitting, and also to get directors and production managers and stage managers to understand that you can't just do a costume fitting at a rehearsal space unless it's all been set up first. And so I think, going back to basics is getting the right actual space. And when I wrote my book, The Costume Supervisor's Toolkit, I actually went to the National Theatre. They were really helpful and allowed me in, and I saw the care that they have. And obviously that's the pinnacle of theatre in the UK. But I think we can learn. You need all the components in the space, and you need to respect that it's not just a guerrilla activity doing a costume fitting
Or a spectator sport. Yeah.
Okay. So, I don't know. As I said, we had a lot of money problems in Brazil, and my context is of post-colony. So, actually my space is the circle. I try to evoke this circle and establish this space in a sense of we will work here. So I'm really interested in the human material, you know, and because we don't have a lot of a structure. So as you perfectly said, the students bring what they want and the discussion. So we work straight with the clothes, we deconstruct, we don't design, as I said. So we work not in mannequins, we work in the body, in the circle area, and with the clothes they bring, and we deconstruct them. So is this for a woman? Is this binary? Why? So we cut it off, cut it all, sleeves, and we open everything. We really open the material. I like this idea of opening the material as they want, as they ask me to do. And also, besides that, I have indigenous students in the university. My university, we have spatial vacancies for indigenous. We are still discussing that in Brazil because it brings also a lot of issues as appropriation and how the shocks of cultures and all that. But at the beginning, I was really aware and afraid of appropriating their culture and bringing references that is, we know. In Brazil, it's really, even for us, European, as I study, as I said, like in a really fine arts, old methodology. But it is impressive. They come to me and they say, I want to share my crafty here. I want to share what we do in our people. So it's been really great to open the space for them. So it's, for me, it's also being aware, as you say, because I really think we sense the class, you know, we sense if they are connected to us, if the work is, if they are losing interest. I think you can really sense that.
I think that's a really interesting idea of the kind of keeping with the pulse of the students. And one of the question I want to ask next, but it kind of also opens up, I think, to the kind of this idea of kind of other systems. I really kind of like this idea of the ecological approach to working together that kind of crosses not just the materials, but the kind of processes and the relationships. And I want to kind of ask, how do we embed sustainability into costume pedagogy? And does it require a radical overhaul of our current teaching system? And then opening that out, what other paradigms maybe do we need to radically overhaul, you know, beyond sustainability?
Can I start? I will start bringing a quote from indigenous author from Brazil, Ailton Krenak. I don't know if you know him. He has a few books. I'm now studying a new one. It's Ancestral Future. So in the first book, I think it's the first one, Ideas to Postpone the End of the World, Krenak asks, what do we want to sustain? He's really critical to this sustainability word and idea, right? So it's more about maybe changing the system than giving it a green, I don't know how we say, green label or something like that. Yeah, so I try also to be aware every time. I don't have the answer. I'm open. I want to learn more. I want to work better for the whole community and together. But I just wanted to share this idea, right? This, his approach to the world, like what do we want to sustain? Because it's really different when I speak from Brazil, again, a post-colony, and a huge country with a lot of social problems and inequality, economic, say, and then listen to the other colleagues, right? So I don't know if I'm...
Yeah, no, that's a great question to ask.
Yeah.
Broadly.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that question. What is it that you want to sustain? At NIDA, we're working with an external working group, including Tanya Beer, advising us on how to embed sustainability into our curriculum. And one of the first sort of hurdles that we have is how do we, the students are fully incentivised to do this, but how do we integrate that into the curriculum when, they're busy, they're tired, we've got so much to do, there's assignments. Do we make it another assignment? One of the things that we've brought in is green stewards. So every production that we do has a green steward who volunteers to be the sort of, not the person responsible, but the person to draw attention to opportunities. And they get some training, and then they might be able to put that on their CV at the end. But one of the things that we did for the last year is we've been doing a sort of status quo report on where are we at the moment, and doing carbon calculations for the productions. And as it turns out, costume is actually pretty good there because of our reuse of stock. So we're already, that's the first question we ask, is how can we not spend money on this? Money equaling resources equaling a larger carbon footprint. So, and certainly the students have been interested in alternative dyes and glues and materials for some time. So yeah, but it does present challenges, particularly when there's time, money, and the just pressures of getting the show on. Often when things change, the last thing you want to do is worry about the more expensive, more timely option. So yeah, so that's not really a solution, but a problem.
One of the things that we do, like at UAL, so because we try to promote a lot collaboration, so it's a great way to like think sustainable, because then we're not just thinking costume, but we're thinking the whole idea of performing, and like if it is makeup, if it is 3D effects, costume props, or costumes. So we're always trying to think how we do. Of course, the first idea that comes to mind is repurposing. So we're always repurposing. That already is part of what we do. But how can we just move forward and do it better? And so we found through costume, it's like creating bioplastics. That's one of the things that we try to develop more. So through bioplastics, so we can just expand a little bit more, even through wigs or makeup or other products that we do and that we use, and processes that we utilize in costume design. So then really literally thinking out of the box. So it's how can we do it with our friends? How can they help us to create a costume that is sustainable, not just by repurposing a shirt, but just making a shirt with gelatin and trying to include it into the performance, and how really this costume is going to be performed in a better way, so technically and performatively. So I think that's what we do. Mm-hmm.
I think I've got 3 points. Let me see if I can get them in the right order. So I teach MA historical costumes. So what we've doing a project at the moment with a museum where we're looking at the way that people in the past because obviously people, it's a modern thing, isn't it? Being incredibly wasteful with everything. And so we're looking at the way that people in the past repurposed garments, recut them, altered them, fixed them, mended them, and we're making work about that, which is really exciting. But you'd think that historical costume students wouldn't really be concerned with sustainability, but it's absolutely the opposite. What I found, my students, every single project that students do now is usually made from found materials, and what I try and do is inculcate a sense of, in designers and makers, to understand that you've got to find, it's not just about finding the right colour for something, or you're finding the right textures and properties of the fabric, and that you have to be flexible. So trying to get flexibility for designers, I think, and makers, because there can be a bit of, I want that colour, because it's in my drawing, or I want that fabric I don't like when it's presented as a maker. So you have to kind of navigate those questions. Another thing we do is we actually make samples of things out of sustainable materials and an example out of traditional materials and compare them. That's quite useful as well. I think that was my 3 points.
I want to move on to talk about digital skills. And, we work in an industry where digital skills are, whether that's kind of on digital pattern making or kind of drawing skills, or kind of working in the kind of 3D, that kind of weird avatar kind of digital making space is kind of becoming increasingly prevalent and desired by industry. And I want to talk about how this potentially impacts the production process and particularly the collaborative process. When I was kind of doing my PhD and observing costume people and work, one of the problems with the computers is that one person has control, right? There's one mouse, and generally there's one, that's the person who has the power. Whereas if you're kind of potentially working on kind of a flat pattern making or around a mannequin, there's kind of, everybody can kind of pick up the materials and interact with them and kind of, talk to that in a different way. And I would really love to hear a little bit more about how you think these kind of increasing emphasis on digital skills is impacting creativity and collaboration in costume.
Yes, I can start. I think because we are now very much working with gaming as that something that we didn't have before. So I think students are more interested now in that kind of a digital world and that kind of skills that they can adopt. And then they're very much interested in designing, they're very much interested in making costumes through digital ways, and through digital drawing and creating avatars and using software like Clo 3D, Marvelous Design, Gerber, all those, that they can manipulate the body, they can manipulate textures, they can manipulate shapes, create patterns, so all this. So then I think it has kind of changed the way that we make costumes. So because now we can see them, we can present them, we can turn them, we can show them. So and that's another way to be very sustainable, because we don't have to make a prototype to show someone, this is what I want to present to you in a 3D way.
Totally agree. And I think in terms of teaching costume design, again, a curriculum crowded now with extra things to learn, new technologies to do with digital screen technologies. Things like Marvelous Designer, I suppose, that we're talking about, give the opportunity for designers to be able to experiment and have a familiarity with pattern making in a way that doesn't require 3 years of training, and looking at things like fabric usage, how different fabrics might appear. There's a whole lot of experimentation that can happen that, as you say, is more sustainable and more collaborative. I think it brings in more empathy in terms of the knowledge, the tacit knowledge that costume makers might have is replicated to a large degree, not fully, in the pixels. One thing it doesn't have, I suppose, is what a friend of mine calls the fourth dimension of design, which is time. And that time that we need to be walking past the mannequin and fiddling with it and then thinking about it and coming in the next morning. So I suppose, yeah, there's something lost, something gained, but probably on the balance, there's more positive in terms of collaboration and empathy that comes out of it.
There's nothing as sustainable as a pencil and paper, though, is there?
Yeah, true.
It's not very fashionable. I think digital is a tool, and we can use that if we have the privilege of having that equipment. I mean, in my own university, we've got body scanners, we've got all the licenses for all this amazing technology that you can drape and pull it across. What's it called? I can't remember what it's called. But you can pull the draped image onto the figure and then rotate it and everything. It's amazing. My students do that. I love it. I mean, it's just fantastic if they can do it. But personally, I like pencils and paper.
I'm so glad you said that, because I was waiting for my time. Again, to talk about our money problems, of course, and then it's just nice to hear you say that, because as I wrote in my slide, costume in a circle, and I started to say circle is also the wheel, I think I'm turning back to the wheel, and of course of those, it's also technology. The pencil is also technology. But I think it's great, digital research. I would love to have it. For us, it's really expensive for the students to buy some computers and devices. But now I'm really interested in more, how can I say, to kind of expanding other skills. For example, natural dyeing. And we make a paint from sand. Is that how you say sand? We have different colors of sands in Brazil. So I sometimes, you know what I'm saying? I'm really interested in engaging with more natural. It can be future, you know. Also bringing again Krenak's work. He says we need to be aware of the present time, sensing, you know, how we are now. And I only believe we heard now, the present time. In present, I think about the future, and I also elaborate about my past. You know, I don't believe in a line, a progressive line that we are all walking together. I think it's more complex than that. But yeah, I think maybe technology can also, it's not only about digital and new devices.
I would love now to throw to all of you, I think we've had some really great ideas here, but what are your thoughts and questions on this? Oh my God, fantastic. So many. There's someone doing mics?
And they're all for Sue. Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, thank you. Some good food for thought. So after some of the eco-scenography talks yesterday, I'm quite interested how you're incorporating that into your costume practices. And I'm working with that and working with a less transactional approach between costume makers and designers. And if a material-based approach towards design and making can help to sort of decolonize and make queer our costume workrooms. That's my question, yeah.
Big question, I love it.
I think if I heard it correctly, I think we need to blur the lines between the designer and the maker and the supervisor, basically. These hierarchical sort of, the habitus of hierarchy, I think, is not the future. That's all I can say. And if I'd been able to be quicker, I would have said developing emotional intelligence is one of the things that we have to actually teach. We have to actually teach how to do that. It's not I'm a designer. You do what I say. You know, that isn't it. And we have to kind of find ways to teach that. I would call it emotional intelligence, basically.
So I think in many places in the world, there's still this hierarchy where the director tells you exactly what to do, and then the designer draws and researches and then passes to the technical team. They create all these sections. So I think the way that we're working now and the way that our students want to work is like collaborating and interpreting and putting all their ideas. So where I work, so at UAL, so we develop like designer makers, so which means they're just collaborators. So they're not just really one maker with a specific skill or one designer with a specific job. It's one creative person that it gets into this team that puts ideas towards this performance or towards this costume or whatever is going to be created. And I think that that's the future of like costume, because we cannot just keep like getting all this information and trickles down until someone is like on the machine desperately making costumes. So we cannot work that way. So now we know how to make, we know how to design, we know how to communicate. So we are collaborating in one project. And I think that's the way, like a healthy way to work. That's the way
absolutely.
I think.
And that, as you say, the pre-production model, which for, in many contexts, that pre-production model as a teaching tool creates a kind of Gordian knot of hierarchies that are so hard to break down when you're working 6 months ahead. So I think that to rethink that does require a complete, pulling apart and rethinking of pedagogy from the ground up. We're trying to do it, there is a place for that pre-production model, because many of our students do go and work in the opera or on films where you're looking at things 6 months, 4 months ahead. But there needs to be an equal place for that democratic, collaborative, beautiful, empathetic art, practice.
And I think one of the things that exists in a hierarchy is that alternative model and the mainstream model, and unpicking that equally, needs to occur. Yeah.
So I just wanted to mention this funny story that I loved repeating. It's an old story. That's why I can repeat it. So there was, once in a while, there was this choreography. Once upon a time, not once in a while. Once upon a time, there was this choreographer that got this huge grant and wanted to create this impressive production. But every time she wanted to see the costumes, she wanted to see the whole ensemble moving on stage. So we created one version, two versions. To make it short, so we created 9 versions of it. And she was always saying, "Oh, this is not what I feel like. This is not what I had in mind. So let's just go." At some point, so we presented the very first version, but she didn't know it was the very first version. And she said, "This is what I wanted. This is what I wanted. Why didn't you give it to me a long time ago?" And we were all rolling our eyes saying, "Oh, well." So then finally, we gave you what you wanted. But because of that hierarchy, it was very difficult to communicate to that choreographer because she was the director. She was telling us what to do, and we just kept following instructions. We wasted time, we wasted resources, we wasted all this kind of energy. So we were so frustrated, and she never knew that she actually put it on stage, the very first version that we presented to her.
I think to talk about my context, I also need to turn back again to history, because if you think of Brazil, the slavery period ended in the beginning of the 20th century. I don't know if you know that. So historically, we have this tradition of rich families, majority white families, being served, that people were forced to serve them. So in my class, when the performer, he makes his own costume. Of course, I'm a designer. I respect our field, our work. I think we should continue collaborating. But for them, it's a switch of perspective, You won't outsource the labor. You will try to make it also. We will try it. And so it's about, of course, creativity. They feeling capable of doing, but also I think it's political too for us, not to outsource and to have the autonomy to put your hands on it also.
Oh my God, there's so many.
All right. Hi. First of all, I just want to say thank you for that. Was a really informative discussion. For a bit of context, I come from a more theatrical cosplay background, and particularly what Erica, you and Rebecca were talking about in consideration to sustainability. My question was more about how do you still sort of create these costumes that are sustainable and sort of I guess archivable and reusable without sacrificing then their sort of distinctability. And I suppose an example of that I sort of thought of is, nobody's going to sort of take an Iron Man costume and use it for anything other than to be Iron Man, or any sort of Broadway costume is never going to be used for anything other than what it was designed for. So I suppose how do we, as designers, create those things? Where do we find that balance between creating something that's still distinctive yet archivable and reusable in regards to that sort of eco-scenographic scene? Thank you.
I mean, one of the things that I find, I've just kind of done some research and writing around stock costume and the ways we use stock costume and the many contributions. The stock costume is often kind of considered the last resort, or the kind of, the thing you kind of have to, the place you make the compromise. But realistically, we're actually using stock costume constantly in many different ways, whether that's through kind of rehearsal and character creation, kind of as a design starting point, as a kind of place of making money through hire and building networks with other companies. So it's actually a very active space, but I love all those kind of costume reuse tumblers that like exist across the internet of like ways in which we spotted this in Anne Boleyn, and then we spotted this in this 80s kind of TV show, and you see that, and some people who do point that out, but the majority of the audiences aren't conscious of that. They're changing trims and they're kind of styling them differently and they're wearing them with different things. So I don't think, that it should be necessarily a point of concern, because a lot of the time the audiences aren't necessarily aware. But the interesting thing is that the performers and the makers are deeply conscious of it, and it's actually a point of reassurance. It's a point of emotional connection to the lineage of past performances. There's actually quite a lot of joy and kind of safety and comfort and kind of that comes from those kind of secularities and those reuses. So yeah, I don't necessarily think that it's a thing that we need to hide. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, and at the ballet, in the ballet world, so then that's a very popular thing to do, and actually dancers love the idea of like wearing this costume that has a label of this like person that did a specific role. So then they actually kind of wait to be able to wear that costume, because it means they have achieved something to arrive to that point where they're wearing that costume. Like one example, even doesn't have to be the principal role, but at the National Ballet of Canada, so one of the principal dancers was Karen Kane, who danced with Nureyev. So, and she had like many tutus that were just when she was corps de ballet, and she was very young, but she was a rising star. So all these corps de ballet dancers, they actually wait for the moment that like maybe that costume will arrive to them. So, and because it's very kind of just there, it's not specific to one person, so they love it. So then it's this kind of inner communication, and opera is the same. So then they always wait for that costume to arrive to them.
Yeah, I think we just need to normalize putting a costume together, costume styling. It is always been happened, and it's not, like you said, it's not a failure of the process, is it? And there was, I keep going about the National Theatre, but there was a fantastic exhibition which unfortunately a lot of people didn't get to see because of the pandemic, but it opened just before the pandemic, which was showing all the processes in costume. And there's a fantastic book, which I would advise everyone to read, which is Costume at the National Theatre, edited by Aoife Monks. And she also, I think, was involved in the exhibition. And it showed a fantastic costume that had been styled by a costume supervisor from the stock in the department. Maybe museums need to show it more. I don't know how that could ever happen, but maybe in the future.
More questions? Yep, maybe down the front here.
Hello, my name is Kristen Essen, and my relationship to costume is as an author and critic. And Erica, I was very interested in this idea of natural dyes and the different sands and colors, and I'm wondering if there might be an approach of teaching color, decolonizing color, and thinking about the places where color has come from and the hierarchies that have produced the materials, right? Who extracts the blues, and how do different blues come from different places? Because in the digital world, that color seems neutral, but it comes from a historical perspective. So I'm wondering what your thoughts might be just on color and culture.
I'm starting to think now. I don't know. Actually, as I teach for the actors, I try to approach in a very sometimes formal way. We discuss color, we discuss shape, we engage in that sense. I'm really interested in we extracting our own color. So I think we meet in this sense. And also in the autonomy I was telling before. I don't know, I think I need to elaborate more, but also it goes with how can I say, oh, I got a blank in English. It's different to say sometimes. And what we have here in the city or in our garden, you know, what's available for us here. As I said, in Campinas, we have a really red sand. So this is kind of a site-specific also, I don't know, you know. We are also looking to our present, as I say, to our community, our space, and we are, I don't know, trying to be aware also of the nature. Yesterday, I watched the introduction to eco-scenography panel, and it was amazing to hear Tanya say she goes to the forest, you know, and she is also being inspired of the vegetable worlds and minerals and stuff. I don't know, I'm elaborating, I don't know if I'm answering anything, but I'm starting to think now.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something. Thank you very much for saying decolonizing color, because it's a very interesting concept. So many times happened to me as a designer that someone that was supposed to hire me would say, well, your palette is a little bit too loud, it's a little bit too bright, it's not European. And like, what do you mean? I'm following the story, I did my research, I work on it. So this is what I'm presenting to you. Yeah, but like, I think you have a different way to see color. And I was like, no, I see color the same way that you see color. But also, nowadays, we can see like digital colors, natural colors, organic colors. There's different ways to see color now. So then someone can tell me, yeah, so there's different ways. So, okay, but decolonizing color is a very interesting way. So now that we're talking equality, diversity, and inclusion. Thank you.
Yeah. I would like to add something. Thank you so much, because I think I didn't engage in a deeper way because of the language. But for sure, for example, in Rio de Janeiro, we have a really colorful carnival. And sometimes in the theater, my professors, they used to tell me, oh, you can use, for example, white, you can use metallic materials, or you know, you can be really colorful because of lighting, because of the black box. So yeah, for sure, I think we have a lot of colonization in that sense. And after listening to you, it made me think more, for sure.
And that, for me, kind of sparks off some interesting ideas about what we consider theatrical. And theatricality is always kind of considered, you know, it's not what we do. You know, we have to kind of be, you know, like, so there's some interesting things there around what's considered theatrical and the theatrical color palette and how that is completely othered in many ways. Yeah. Oh my gosh, we've got to run out of time. I'm afraid we're going to have to continue the conversation in lunch break. I think we're breaking for lunch now, so we can have lots of time to have conversations for lunch. Maybe we can just kind of all agree that we're going to be out there eating lunch. Before I close, I want to just announce that very shortly we're going to be releasing a call for papers on this topic about costume pedagogy for studies in costume and performance. We don't have any dates for that yet, but we'll keep an eye out. You can come grab a flyer, so that'll be, you know, you can sign up to the newsletters, and it'll be announced through the Critical Costume Network, I'm sure. So we're going to continue this conversation in other formats. I want to thank PQ for programming this talk. Barbara, thank you so much for allowing space for us in the program. Thank you all for being such an engaged and interested audience. And also, lastly, but most importantly, I want to thank my speakers, Erica, Rebecca, Sue, and Jorge. And I want to acknowledge that Jorge is shortly retiring. So congratulations to him, and our biggest gratitude for sharing your wisdom before you head off on this new exciting adventure of Canada and life. Thank you so much for coming, everybody.